Good afternoon, good morning, everybody who is tuning in. Thank you so very much. With you today, my name is Matt Allison. I'm the your D&H Modern Solutions sales manager, and I am very excited because today I get to talk about something near and dear to my heart, Microsoft. Specifically, today we're going to talk about Windows Server 2022, and I know what you're thinking. Oh no, here comes Matt ready to rant about Windows Server. No. In fact, I have brought an expert with me today who's going to tell you what you should know, what you need to know about modernizing with Windows Server 2022. With me today is Mitch Doctor. He's the U.S. Commercial Master Trainer for Microsoft. Mitch, are you there with me?
Hey, Matt, how are you?
I'm doing well. So I'm going to turn it over to Mitch. He's got a lot of information to present to you guys today. We're going to start with that so you get a general idea of what is on the agenda. And then following that, we are going to have a Q&A session. So absolutely, please stick around for that. At any point during the presentation, throw your questions into the Q&A so I can organize them and then present them to Mitch as when we get to that point. We're also going to have a handful of polling questions that are going to pop up as the presentation happens. I encourage you to please answer those. That feedback is really important to us, helps us to make changes to these presentations in the future with that feedback. So without further ado, Mitch, thank you very much for being here, and take it away.
Thanks, Matt, and all the rest of the crew at D&H for having me today. And Matt said we are going to talk about Server 22 today. It's going to be fun. It will be a little here and there. If you're familiar with Server already, nothing crazy and new and, revelations or anything like that. But it's just really good to understand what Server 22 has to offer, why customers might want to upgrade to 2022, and kind of just what's in store to modernize your kind of on-prem servers, and how they might even reach out to your cloud solutions. So with that being said, let's go ahead and jump right in. And then the first thing we need to talk about is, well, Windows Server is anywhere, and it's been everywhere for quite a while now. Well, of course, we had lots of on-prem for a very, very long time, and on-prem moved over to cloud this, cloud that. Everybody needs cloud. And now where we are today, especially here post-pandemic, hybrid is really the new name of the game, right? We're really focused on what hybrid is. As prevalent as it is now in the cloud and back and forth and how many different things, it's really coming down to what's right for that individual customer and that individual organization to do what they need to do. So right now, a mix of on-prem and cloud, whether that's a 90-10 split or 50-50 split, the idea is just to be able to cater to that individual customer for what they need, whether they need a cloud solution or an in-house on-prem data center, or they're looking to go ahead and reach out to edge devices. No matter what they're looking for, Windows Server 2022 has a solution that is ready and possible to do just that.
Hey, so, Mitch, I'm sorry, real quick. I don't mean to interrupt because this is good stuff. However, unfortunately, we're having audio issues on your end. I just didn't know if it was a microphone connection issue or something.
Interesting.
That's back to
Any
normal.
Better?
Back to normal. Yep, sounds good.
Okay.
Okay, continue.
Really weird. Sorry about that, everyone. I hope that is a little bit better. So we're going to talk about a couple different customers, but a customer we do focus on, especially when it comes to server, are our SMB customers. And the big question here is, well, why in the world does an SMB even need a server and even need an on-prem solution? So we know the game is always changing for small and mid-sized businesses. So they need to be lean. They have to stay lean. So what they do is we need to invest, and they need to invest in to scale, right? And that they can scale very quickly. So Server 22 gives them the abilities to really stay ahead of the game today and into the future. And when you're ahead of the game, obviously, you're leading the game. And I think that's really important to think of. So for businesses who need to grow and scale efficiently, Server 22 gives them a couple different big capabilities. One, sharing files and folders is just easy, and to organize all their business documents in a single place. We're also being able to provide security anywhere and at any time, and anywhere access as well. And that's really important because you can quickly connect to network PCs and access files and programs from literally anywhere, as long as, say, it's connected online, for instance. And then data is protected through daily automatic backups can be set up to computers, to networks, to the entire organization if that deems necessary. Of course, a built-in security and security always on, simple management to both deploy and manage from a single pane of glass, single view dashboards, which is kind of what we're talking about, so we can manage individual users, devices, and all of our storage programs all in one way. And then, of course, being able to leverage the server's power for virtualization and containerization for app development and for IT to manage. So let's go ahead and jump just a little bit forward here and actually talk about server's been around for quite a while, and I think it's quite interesting when we think about it. When we think about server around for almost 25 years with NT4 and making servers just available to the masses and not just a large business, and moving into looking at the data center age between 2000 and 2008 and having that evolution, and then of course Windows Server 2022, which we know is out there and we know lots of users are still using. And believe it or not, I'm really showing you this for one reason and one reason only. It's because we have folks over this kind of ubiquitous use case of Windows Server over the years, and lots of things come end of service or end of life, right? Windows Server 2022 is coming end of life in October of 2024. So that is just over a year and a half away. So the sooner businesses do choose to upgrade into a modern server solution like Server 22, the better off they'll be in the long run. So things like new security and advanced development, and we'll talk about all those specific pieces here in just a couple minutes. But I think that is really the big piece here, is the show just the ubiquitous of Windows Server, and that you very well might have customers out there that are touching servers every day that could be 10, 11, 12, 13 years old, so on and so forth. And of course, now moving into cloud and how we use cloud in the last 4 to 6 years, for instance, Windows Server 2022 has really taken that to another level, and being able to truly reach out and be a hybrid solution on an on-prem bare metal device, but being able to reach out to Azure and other cloud services. And like I said, we'll talk a little bit about that as we go here over the next 15, 20 minutes or so. But let's kind of review the additions of Windows Server, because that's important as well. So if you're familiar with Server 2019, these are the same exact 3 additions that we have. There's Essentials, a Standard, and of course a Data Center. I want to touch on Data Center for just a second, because it is a great solution out there that is not always necessary like, oh, let's go to Data Center. It is definitely an upsell opportunity for those looking for a bare metal server or just a server in the cloud, for instance, for their upgrades. And the biggest upgrade to it has to come with virtual machines and how many virtual machines are possible to run, as well as how cores work and relicensing. We'll talk a little bit more about licensing later, but just know that the Data Center edition of Server 22 is an upsell opportunity from the Standard Edition or the multiple licensing in Standard Edition. But where we do change things a little bit here in 2022 is in our Essentials Edition. Why? Because the Essentials Edition used to be sold throughout, right? You used to be able to get a Coam if you wanted to. But for now, as of 22 came out, you no longer can. The only way to get Server Essentials Edition is through a ROC or a reseller options kit way of obtaining a server through here at D&H. They use, of course, HP Enterprise servers and ROC devices. What that does is essentially just gives you that little bit of a leg up and extending to your customer everything from pre-tested devices to extended service contracts with the manufacturer, and it just makes it a little bit easier to deploy. There's less hands-on at the endpoint or at that organization, and there's a lot more pre-setup already done. And all of that also has guaranteed genuine Windows Server licensing with it. So it's just another way to maybe get a small business that's not super comfortable, doesn't have a large IT department, into a server with the correct solutions in essentially one nice package. And you can, of course, reach out to D&H and their server specialist for more information on that. And of course, there's the OEM licensing as well, and that's kind of where all that falls into. All right, but let's talk about Server 22. What really separated it from what came before, what's added on, and why should customers really think about upgrading to Server 22 and modernizing their server solutions in general? There's 3 big topics, and we're going to dig into each one individually here, but the biggest, and I think by foremost, anywhere we talk about, if we're talking about new devices or new hardware or new software to any customer at all, I don't care if it's Windows devices or individual network device, whatever. Security is top of mind absolutely everywhere right now, and is the very first thing that I'm talking about, especially with customers and partners like yourselves almost every single day. We're able to elevate security posture in Server 22 because of being able to take advantage of the new Server 22 operating system, as well as some new hardware improvements, and we'll talk about that. Also, there's far more hybrid capabilities. We talked about hybrid is our quote unquote new normal of ways servers communicate. So if a company has multiple options or multiple solutions in the cloud, yet keeping things on-prem, the idea is even using Server 2022, it can reach all the way out to the edge if it wanted to or needs to, and it just gives IT a little more efficiency, especially when working with Azure. And then lastly, it's about flexible application platforms. What do I mean? We're really just looking on how to empower devs and IT pros in their application platforms and to be able to build and deploy diverse applications better. This is where containerization comes in, as well as more power for things like SQL Server. And we'll get into all of this. But let's start with security because that's where everybody wants to talk, right? There's a couple big things that we did. First and foremost, Secure Core PC is something that's now been on Windows for a little while, and it's a mandatory requirement when looking at Windows 11 professional devices. It is now required in Server 22 with the newest hardware from all of our Silicon partners. Having a secured core server being built by Microsoft in collaboration with all of our OEM partners and our Silicon vendors are protecting users against attacks by following a couple different requirements. One, it loads Windows completely securely, as well as protecting the firmware and identity from the get-go. Even if that server physically wasn't turned on, these things are already being protected. All of this is really I guess a result of having a secured hardware isolated environment possible with a TPM or a trusted platform module 2.0 chipset included as part of a modern CPU. So being able to boot the server securely, this minimizes firmware vulnerabilities, registry, and anything else for that matter, because all of those things live in a virtualized base security, let's call it a bubble for lack of a better term, right? So all of those things are run through that TPM and the processor itself. So all of your firmware and all of your boot and all of the identity protection, everything for that server all runs through an encrypted chipset on the physical hardware itself. So that real hardware root of trust is now extended on an individual server or the server cluster if every piece of the server obviously has that. We've also upgraded, so all secure core servers now follow everything from that secure boot we talked about. Their firmware and security bugs are now blocked, and the actual OS itself, because it lives in this virtualized security bubble, for instance, is now free from other attacks that might get through, whether it gets through a firewall or it's going to, unfortunately, a malicious attack gets onto the OS itself. But the idea is that the OS and its files that are most necessary to run the actual server itself are no longer to be affected, because this is able to prevent that unauthorized access, because it has no way to check against that hardware root of trust, because it doesn't belong to it, essentially, right? So it is really, really wonderful. And now you're going to ask, great, there's so much to do and so much to see. How do you control it all? Well, our single dashboard hasn't changed for that, and we'll talk about our pane of glass Windows Admin Center here in just a short bit. But as a quick reminder, it is a free Windows Server management tool. Free. Like I said, we'll go to it here in a little bit, but it allows a management of course, all Windows Server workloads, security policies, so on and so forth, and even extends all the way out to Windows 10 and 11 Pro devices as well from a single platform. And the idea is just making IT admins life just that much easier to be able to apply policies across their environments and across their organizations very, very quickly from a single pane of glass, just so it's nice, easy, and fluid. But that's not all. You go, but wait, there's more, right? It's not just about that hardware root of trust, but we've also increased the security of the connectivity within the actual server and the server communication as well. My apologies. So, with all these different hardware innovations, it's enabled us to do a couple different things. Now, all transport within the server and outside of that server is enabled with TLS 1.3 by default. TLS 1.3, of course, is the latest version of the internet's most deployed security protocol. This encrypts data and provides that secure communication channel between two endpoints. And now that it eliminates obsolete algorithms and enhances security over even older versions of communication. And this is the aim of this, of course, is to encrypt as many handshakes between endpoints as possible. And what is wonderful is Server 22 includes TLS 1.3 enabled by default. So, of just by default, by just essentially rolling into Windows Server 2022, all the data of clients connecting to the server is already that much safer because it's using the latest in security protocols. The one other big add-on here, which I think is really incredible, is if you think of an individual server with the multiple, individual cluster of multiple servers and information being moved around just that cluster, for instance, that information used to not be encrypted. So if there was a malicious act or a vulnerability reached in within that communication within a single cluster, that data was accessible and unencrypted. But in Server 2022, all of that communication now inside a single cluster within internal communications is also now all encrypted. As you can see here, full east to west encryption controls for internal cluster communication. So we're closing up vulnerabilities even in the connection space. All right. So what are we doing in hybrid? Well, a lot, believe it or not. When we use different tools and different cloud solutions, not just Azure. I know it's not just Azure out there. People are using cloud, they're using Google, or they're using AWS, and they're using whatever other solutions they want. Now, what's really cool with Azure Arc enabled in a Windows server is this enables all Windows servers and multiple cloud and Azure Arc, as well as AWS and Google and wherever cloud might live. This allows management from a single place to reach all these different endpoints. And that's why we said now Server 2022 can reach out all the way into the cloud, because Azure Arc can run natively on Windows Server 2022 and being controlled by Windows Admin Center, of course. This truly enables our reach to all of our virtual machines and our bare metal to have all of them essentially under one roof. This means that we can manage all of those different things all the way out to the edge on cloud, on multiple cloud instances, on multiple cloud solutions, as well as on a bare metal on-prem brand new Server 2022 device, all from one place. And that's what Azure Arc allows us now to do. Now, the tool in ordering us to do all of this is, of course, Windows Admin Center. Now, this is the version that came out when Server 2022 was released. There is a newer version of Windows Admin Center as well. It is also compatible with what we talked about, Windows 10 and 11 Pro PCs as well. And it is essentially a super simple, lightweight, single pane of glass that just makes management tasks easy. It installs under 5 minutes and it manages servers within your environment immediately after connecting to it. No target configuration is required once being logged in to your server environment. And then, like we talked about, there's full-blown integration with Azure services, so you can really help leverage the power of the hybrid world together by being able to manage hyper-converged clusters with the powerful, simple tools being built in here, as well as reaching out to your multiple cloud solutions, as well as what's going on the bare metal. Now, maybe you want to be able to access this and be able to do this through the cloud on Azure. Maybe you're not sitting in front of the bare metal. Maybe you just don't have that capability right this second. Well, now our favorite server management tool, Windows Admin Center, is also available natively inside the Azure portal. So for someone who wants to do all of their management, and maybe they're big on cloud management right now, but looking to add an on-prem solution or looking to upgrade an on-prem solution, with Windows Server 2022 being able to be managed via Azure Arc and Windows Admin Center. So for an admin that is already using the Azure portal to manage all of their cloud workloads, etc., can now also manage their bare metal on-prem Windows Server 2022 solution from that same pane of glass. So pretty excellent. And then folks want to know, what about storage migration services? Well, we've made it even easier. Why? Because now storage clusters and being able to move from one cluster and multiple branches all allows us to migrate data from, say, original servers in the infrastructure. And instead of copying and pasting and manually moving them over and, oh, did I lose? Did I get this file? Did I get that file? Now, to be able to make sure you get everything, we can take advantage of Azure, even if we're working on the bare metal, to help us migrate that data so nothing's ever going to be lost. It's all backed up to the cloud first, so nothing is lost, and and it's using cloud or Azure as a middleman before moving all the new files over to, say, the new target server. It also makes for syncing data between servers that much simpler. So a change obviously on one server will then change on the other server, and that's enabled by Azure File Sync, like you see here. So we can have the same information over multiple servers if we wanted to, even over multiple clusters. We can move it, we can migrate it, and so on and so forth, and make sure that all files are synced through. Now, the Azure File Sync does transform the Windows Server into essentially a quick cache, right, for all of your Azure files, so they can quickly share over their connection quite quickly. And you can use any protocol available on Windows Server to be able to access your data locally. So this includes SMB, NFS, and FTPS as well. So you can have as many caches as you want and whatever you need across the entire infrastructure of an organization and whatever server solutions they're using today. One sec, I apologize. Okie dokie. Now, and then we also have the ability to do, this is all great information. Do I have to have an IT manager on this all the time? How are they going to keep things straight? How am I going to make sure security policies follow through? How am I going to make sure updates follow through? Well, Azure Auto Manage allows us to do that. Azure Auto Manage is already a solution in play for IT operations on the cloud side. But because Windows Server does communicate to the cloud and uses Windows Admin Center and whatnot, it can also be auto-managed through the same cloud solutions, right? So management, instead of managing proactively, they can actually manage via exceptions. So if something doesn't work and say the update isn't successful to all devices, a manager would get a notification essentially in whichever way they want. And then, oh, that's an exception to the rule. Let me go and investigate that. And then they can solve that individual way. This is everything from auto backup and changing automation and how accounts work and different identities in the security center, so on and so forth, can all now be auto managed and don't have to be on a necessarily rhythm of an IT manager spending hours and days being able to make sure that everything within their organization is always up to date. So this is exactly what it looks like, and Auto Manage lives in the exact same pane of glass that we talked about earlier, right? So all of your server VMs and being able to make sure all the VMs are security patched and making sure the different apps and the services all stay up to date and the environment is always protected. All of this can all be done through Auto Manage without any extra input from IT admins unless an exception is reached that they can then go in and essentially fix it. It also allows a security update being applied to a virtual machine without having to reboot that virtual machine as well. This is really important, obviously, for businesses because it now reduces any chance of downtime just for a security update. Now that security updates can all kind of be a hot install and servers don't have to be taken down just for an update. All right. Server 22 is also empowering our developers and our IT pros in a couple different ways as well through more advanced flexible application platforms. In short, SQL is just better on Server 22. We know SQL Server is a huge solution being leveraged on server in general, on Windows servers. It has for a very long time. For the very first time in Server 22, we can now have SQL servers support up to 48 terabyte of memory on large memory systems, and it's highly optimized for it. It is also able to support massive scale up systems up to 2048 logistical cores, as well as now using Intel's newest processors, the SGX processors. We allow users to isolate applications and their virtual workloads while they're physically computing. So even if something malicious or an outside factor or force, or say an update or something was going on that server, nothing can actually access that data or the application while it's in its compute phase. And it is completely isolated for that, which is really, really great for our SQL Server users. Then we're just accelerating app modernization, and it's all about containers. I know it's about containers. This is where development is headed right now. For customers specifically interested in running things like Linux containers on Windows, Azure Stack HCI is probably going to be a better solution for them. But when it comes to containerization and using Azure Kubernetes services, this can all also be done now on Windows Server 2022. The idea of having all their orchestration and Kubernetes integration and now being able to be possible from Server 2022 as well allows just the industry to align and have those solutions even on an on-prem solution like Server, for instance. And the real name of the game is it's about scalability. You can scale up, you can scale down. It's all about scalability and performance and being able to make sure that it is globally scalable to have the containers and your app development and deployment all in one place. And then we've gone one further in containers and take a little bit of time, right? And now in Windows Admin Center, we're getting rid of the overhead. And there is a lot of overhead, especially when it comes to getting a containerization ready. So writing Docker files and different YAML files and making sure that they're aligned correctly and is the right container being built for the right app at this point. Well, now in Windows Admin Center, right, that one point pane of glass or that one hub for everything you need, now can actually build containers for you to fully support in Azure Kubernetes services. So no matter what you want, by being able to hit a couple drop downs and do a couple different settings, it is now just as easy for an IT admin, for instance, to set up a container for a dev team to have to either develop, test, and then eventually deploy. All right. I'm going to take a quick breath because that is a lot going on. So let's touch on server licensing just a little bit, and then we're actually going to get, we'll have some time to do some Q&A. So there's three types of licensing when it comes to Windows Server 2022, very similar to 2019. One, there's always going to be a base license. The base license or the base license for a standard edition of a server is good for a 16-core processor. And that'd be it. You get the product activation code and you get a single install license. Now, if you have more than 16 cores, remember we were talking about earlier that there's 64 core processors and whatnot now. So you would have to then get a base license and then add additional core licenses. So this is not to be confused with what we're going to go into here in a second, but this is just for additional core licenses. So if we look at 16, and 16 is 32, of course, up to 64. So if you have a brand new 64 core processor, you'd be looking at one base license plus 3 additional core licenses. And that would be your license agreement to license that server. Now, you don't want to forget CALs either. So client access licensing is mandatory for all user and devices that are therefore accessing the server for information. So whether it is a remote user who needs an RDS CAL for remote access, or if it's something simple like, I don't know, a door lock that needs to be badged in, and it's going to communicate to the server to make sure that the security protocols are met and it's the correct person. So that being said, this is a base licensing for server. But there are 2 different editions of server as well. And these 2 different editions now differ in the way virtual machines work. And this is really important. So the first thing we need to be able to challenge our customers for is what kind of workloads are they looking to run locally on the bare metal? So if it is something simple like 2 or 4 virtual machines to run maybe, I don't know, a security, a virtual machine to run security workload, and maybe another one to run email, and another one to run, I don't know, whatever they're up to, right? Going ahead with standard would make sense. But there's different ways of licensing. Now, take into account a fully licensed physical server would be on our 64 core server, for instance, would be your standard license plus your 3 additional core licenses. That is your fully licensed server, whatever that price might be. That allows you to have 2 virtual machines on a standard license. What if a customer needs 4 virtual machines? Well, what we can do is relicense the entire server again. By relicensing the entire server again, instead of 64 cores, we're now going to 120, what is that, 128, whatever it is. So we're doubling the amount of cores now licensed, but you also get double the virtual machines, therefore double the workloads available. Now, if you wanted to do this again, you could say if a customer wants 5 virtual machines, you're going to go ahead and relicense all 64 cores again for a third time, therefore allowing them up to 6 virtual machines to be used. This is showing kind of what that break-even point is. Now, this is actually taking into account if you're just using a base 16 core license and not using additional core license. So you'll notice there is a break-even point, and this is the break-even point between server standard licensing and server data center licensing. Now, remember we talked about server data center being a great upsell to server standard depending on what workloads needed to take place at that customer or at that organization on the bare metal, for instance. So it's really somewhere between 10 and 12 virtual machines if we're just judging it in that respect. So if we're judging it in that respect, we're actually going to save our customers a lot more money by going to data center if they're going to be using more than, say, 10 virtual machines. But this number actually changes quite a bit and can be actually closer to 6 virtual machines if we're talking about a fully loaded 64 core processor server, or a core processor server, right? Being able to run virtual machines, because remember, it's the standard license plus 3 additional. And again, I will more than happy answer these questions here in Q&A because we're coming up to it here in just a minute. So what are some extra steps? Well, you yourself can actually learn and improve features of all the Windows Server 22 has for you and how you can assist your customers with that by heading over to Microsoft's free training platform known as Expert Zone. You can go to this direct link, the AKA link here, to check out the Expert Zone Server 2022 accreditation, as well as a download. Once you finish that accreditation, you'll get a badge that you can put on your email and on your LinkedIn profile as well. Then it is definitely time to start talking to your customers and seeing how Server 22 might fit into their solution today, and start looking at how Server 22 can be a new resource for you as a source of revenue on your upgrade stream as you talk to some customers that might still be, really holding on to Server 2012, for instance. And then you can also even more get skilled up if you're interested in getting your Windows Server Hybrid Administrator Certificate that can be found there. With that, I want to thank you for your time. I hope that you learned a little bit something today. I know it's a ton of information. I know we also have polls going, so big thank you to the polls going out to the DNH team. But I do want us to take some time and take some questions.
Yeah, thanks, Mitch. That was awesome. I know I've been sitting here writing down a page and a half of notes, so that was a lot of information, but it was so worthwhile. So worthwhile. Speaking of that, just so everyone is on the same page here, this presentation will be available for you to review. It's on demand. You can see it in a number of different places. The fastest would be if you go to dnh.com, and on the upper right hand corner, go to develop your business and then select DNHTV. Under DNHTV, you'll see a whole bunch of previous videos, including this one. I want to say it's up within about 24 hours after it initially airs. We also have a YouTube page as well, so check that out so you can review this later on. Okay, So Mitch, that was great. We got a lot of questions, so I will just start firing them off at you here. We did get a lot of responses back on our polling questions as well, so we will review some of that too here. But first, awesome. It looks like Jeffrey had a question pretty early on in the presentation, so I wanted to address that first of all. Is with Windows Server 2022, does it support BitLocker protection at the share level? That's how he worded it. I don't know what he means by the share level.
I'm not quite sure how it's worded. So BitLocker, of course, can be supported with that TPM 2.0 on the individual data itself or on the drives themselves. But the share level, if we're sharing between two endpoints, no, right? That's BitLocker encryption is meant to be local on the physical piece of hardware. We're using the different security protocols like TLS 1.3, for instance, to make sure that it is a secure handshake between endpoints.
Awesome. That makes sense to me. Jeff, if that if that doesn't answer your question, feel free to send us another follow-up on that. Okay. Actually, I got another question here from Jeffrey. It says, also, is there no way to protect a Active Directory login with MFA other than using Azure AD?
That depends on what the customer solutions are. There are other solutions out there. 100% there are, right? And if they want to use other solutions, you can. Multi-factor authentication can be done in multiple different ways. It doesn't have to either be, the Authenticator app. It could be a key fob. It can be biometrics. It could be a biometric key fob. Again, there's so many different options out there to be able to support multi-factor authentication. But Azure AD is not the only way. However, we do recommend it for Windows because it is already part of a lot of the licensing that folks are already looking at, because they're already using M365 business licensing, Azure AD, Intune, endpoint management, Windows Server. Again, single pane of glass for all their solutions in one place. It just makes sense. Sure, if they have other vendors and other solutions in place, we'll still fit into that infrastructure as well. So you can add that into our infrastructure. And what's nice is, if you remember Azure AD, it's also completely open. So if other folks are using other modern deployment management tools, other MDMs, like not Intune and other stuff like that, they can even still use that as an endpoint manager to control Azure AD if they wanted to. Yep. But we talk about Azure and Intune and endpoint management by Microsoft because it's already packaged together.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you're preaching to the choir here. I'm a huge proponent for Azure AD all day long. I guess just a question that I had asking that was, with ADDS, included with Windows Server, just confirming there is no MFA option with standard domain services?
Correct.
Right. I just making sure. I had a feeling.
Yep.
Okay. Let me see. We've got a ton of stuff here. Okay. Can you explain, this is pretty much just back to basics, but I want to make sure we level set. Can you explain the difference between the different versions of the licensing, and basically with the difference between OEM, ROC, and COEM?
Yep. So OEM is something essentially that comes pre-installed from the manufacturer, right? Same as, and that's just kind of what it is. Now, ROC is another version of that, which is also everything is preloaded, pre-tested. With D&H, you have HPE solutions through HP Enterprise. Of course, that has a server essentially ready to go, right? It is really a ready to go pre-packaged server that you can deliver to your customer with almost zero touch install on their end. And then COEM is essentially you'd be getting a blank server and then installing server yourself through digital licensing or FPP.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Well, let's cover a couple of the polling results here first. This one I was actually it's pretty kind of surprised. It was kind of across the board. Simply just what percentage of your customers do you still run 2012? As you can see, I don't know if you can see that, Mitch, from your screen there.
So, I mean, less than 25%. I'm all for that, right? But more than 50% is a little, right? That's a fourth, right? That's a little disturbing, right? With end of service is just what is it? 16 months away.
Yeah. And if you guys need to have a plan for that end of service, reach out to our team. We can talk to you about the cloud option, of course, migrating to the latest server if necessary. But if you need to stick with 2012, there are options available to you. So reach out and we'll talk about them. Next poll here was, what was the top reason for your customers to obtain new servers in Windows Server 2022? As you can see, lots of answers here. I did like all of the above. I think that obviously does encompass a lot of what
think it makes
our
sense.
customers are dealing with. Yeah. Well, while that's up there, let's keep going on the questions. Good. They keep popping in here. Thanks, guys. So I got another one. Any resource that we can provide them for either live demos or recorded demos of how the various tasks that you described, is anything like that available to them?
Interesting. I don't, but there are some things on a couple of the Microsoft Empower websites. Also, I know that your server specialists at DNH do have things, and they're also quite talented in it. So I would definitely say reach out to DNH and their server specialist team. Are quite excellent at making sure the different tasks and different solutions you're looking for can be solved, and give you kind of a little step-by-step on how that can be possible for your customers.
I appreciate that, because he's absolutely right. Yeah, guys, we can absolutely answer you a lot of those questions, and we can provide you with a lot of trial licenses, demos, and recorded things. There's a number of aliases here to keep in mind. If you have questions specifically around licensing, remember licensedesk@dnh.com. If it's more or less about server product, go with Microsoft OEM at dnh.com. And then I'll plug my group. We are, tertiary to this, but the modern applications at dnh.com. We are your cloud providers. So if there's anything to do with CSP, and of course, if you don't know which one, email any of us and we'll get you to the right place.
Or email all three and see who answers first.
Or email all three, yes. Here's another polling result. What is the top reason for your customers to... Oh, I'm sorry. Did I already do that one? I already did that one.
No, you didn't. But look, it's the same answer I said it was going to be. Security, right? It's still going to be number one. And we know that.
Awesome. I got a question here from Norman. I imagine this was when you were going over the licensing requirements, the core licensing requirements.
Yep.
His question was, is it an aggregate of 16 processor cores or a single 16 core processor?
A single license by itself, the standard license, is good for a server up to 16 cores by itself. So it would be an aggregate, right? But if you had a 24 core processor, you would get the standard, right? Plus you would get an 8 core additional license, right? Because you get in 2, 4, 8, and 16s.
Yep, that makes sense. All right, next up is a question about AutoManage. Is AutoManage required for hot patching, or will hot patching be available via other management tools such as popular RMM tools?
That is a great question. I do not know the answer to off the top of my head. I will have to look something like that up. I know AutoManage and using Azure AutoManage is the only way I know of hot patching or security patches onto VMs right now. We could definitely look up that answer for you, and we can make sure it gets answered.
Awesome. Yeah, I flagged that so we can review it. This is actually a question, pretty open question, but this is one from me. Mitch, how would you compare Windows Admin Center, which I'm really excited to learn more about as you were showing in your presentation, versus Endpoint Manager, and then both of them versus SCCM, which I imagine most of the people on the call are familiar, at least with the last one, with System Center?
Sure. Windows Admin Center is a single platform that allows us to manage server workloads essentially over the cloud. It allows us to manage cloud workloads, on-prem workloads on bare metal, everything from security policies and everything else for that matter. Now, the extension of Microsoft Endpoint Manager, or Intune for short is how we refer to it, is a way to manage individual devices like Windows 10 and 11 Pro devices, for instance. And then that being built all in together within the same platform allows IT administrators to really go to one place to manage their entire organization's environment.
That makes sense. But let me ask you, so with 22,
Yes.
is System Center an option? And if it is, does it at all interact with Windows Admin Center? Or have we moved past System Center at this time?
I think I believe it does work, but I think we're also moving beyond it at this point, where Admin Center being so light for what it is, it just allows us a lot more flexibility.
Okay. Sounds good.
Oh, I see in here. So I'm looking at the Q&A. So thank you to your server specialist who is in here. Stephen Bernard is here. Thank you for correcting me, Stephen. Yes, COAM is not a digital or FPP license. It is a standalone license. I do apologize. It is a channel OEM fulfilled license that physically comes on disk.
Awesome. Yeah, Steve, absolutely. We rely on him quite a bit.
Yes, I appreciate it.
So I think this question might be using the wrong term, but I'll read it as written. Why does Azure ADDS use Server 2012 instances under the hood?
I couldn't tell you. I'm not a developer, nor do I have anything to physically do with how it's built. That's a great question. If we can find someone on the server development team, I'm sorry, I'm just not the right person for that.
Okay, storage migration service. Also very excited about that. I imagine, first of all, that service requires an Azure subscription, right?
Yeah.
Under an existing tenant. Can it be used to migrate workloads to Azure, to be hosted in Azure? I mean, migrate's in the title, but I know there are other tools available for doing that.
So that specific tool we talked about is not for transferring the workload itself. That's just the file transfers.
I see. So that's just data migration.
Just data migration on that. But yes, there are absolutely other tools for migrating virtual workloads for sure. Yes. Great. They do exist.
And another one that I thought of, and I mean, seriously, this is a huge one for me. On the Azure side, the conversation about containers is never ending. It's clearly the focus from Microsoft, but I would say from even the smallest developers up, it's gotten a lot of attention over the years. So the fact, if I'm understanding correctly, I guess that's part of my question, the fact that it seems that you can develop containers on Windows Server 22, use them in a dev test sort of environment, and then migrate them and host them in Azure. Did I understand that process correctly? Yep. And is there any additional licensing or costs involved in doing that? Oh, excuse me.
So you
just need Azure.
Yep. Because remember, it's extending itself out to Azure Kubernetes services. So it's using Azure to empower that deployment.
I see. So this isn't anything that you are...
And the idea is it's hybrid, right? So Server 22 just does a better job at communicating with hybrid cloud solutions. So you can have an on-prem solution that still works with your cloud solutions instead of essentially having two different systems completely, right?
I completely understand. Yeah, that totally makes sense.
Because for a long time, your on-prem bare metal had to be run completely separately from your cloud solutions. The idea is, obviously, in 2019, there was more hybrid to it, but 22 has a lot more hybrid. There's a lot more handshaking between Azure or even HCI at that point and a bare metal on-prem Server 22 device.
Yep, that makes total sense. I think we did leave. I have one last poll here I wanted to share with you, and this is just customers using Windows Admin Center. So as we can see, about 2/3 are not. So hopefully this training, hopefully this exposure to it, will affect that number, for our next Windows training, ultimately. Okay, and then I got a couple questions here from Matthew. Thank you very much, Matthew. First one is simply, will SMB over Quick become available on Server 2022 on-prem the same way that hot patching is now available on on-prem licenses?
Great question. I do not know the answer to now, so we will definitely get it for you.
Yeah, these are great questions, Matt. Seriously.
Great questions.
All right, then the last question we have here also is from Matt. With the majority of the new features announced to be exclusive to Windows Server 2022 Data Center Azure Edition, yet now hot patching is available on on-prem licenses, is Microsoft walking back the abandonment of on-prem? I think he's picking up on features being added on-prem. Yeah.
Yeah. So one, there is no such thing as Windows Server 2022 Data Center Azure Edition. That's Azure HCI, right? That's the different OS. There is absolutely two operating systems. We moved away from the Azure, right? There's Azure HCI, right? Hyperstack Converged Infrastructure. That's its own operating system. And then there's Server 2022. They have two different use cases, right? We know that there's on-prem use cases and there's also huge cloud premise, right? The idea is, no, we're not walking back at all. And for those customers, the idea of going into Server 22 or even having a small cluster and wanting to do a couple things on-prem and obviously moving toward more of a hybrid infrastructure anyway with an on-prem and cloud solution is just being able to have a solution like Server 22 that can reach out into the cloud to even start, an organization to kind of get their feet wet. Even if the only thing they're doing is storage migration or emergency recovery backup and whatnot, and that's what they're going to use Azure for, that's great. But they'll start understanding. Now, they are, again, two different solutions. I am not very well versed in Azure HCI, to be honest. It's a bit above my head. I have a wonderful crew over who talks Azure HCI every day. That is their job. But that is really the difference there.
Yeah, and if I think that's the last. Yeah, that's the last we have. And guys, if if you have any further questions, if there's any more information that you're looking to get here, again, there's a lot that's happening in at Microsoft at any given time. So I want to make sure that you guys are getting the proper answer. So yeah, Matthew, please, I see that link there. We were actually just talking to Steve here. Yeah, so like I said, there's a lot of moving wheels here, and so that just might be something we need to get back to you on. We appreciate your understanding. Yeah, we're looking at that now, Steve. Thank you. But that is all we have for questions, guys. I'll give you about 30 more seconds to fire away any other concerns, questions, what have you, that you'd like to address with Mitch before we let him go. And while I am waiting that extra 30 seconds, I will tell everybody, please stay tuned. We are going to have another webcast next week, actually, on July 7th. We're having a webcast entitled Greater Connectivity Benefits the Greater Good. So that is, again, going to be on July 7th, usually around 2 p.m. I'm going to go ahead and assume that because it's not on my list here. And, of course, you can find that information out if you go to dnh.com. So without further ado, I don't have anything else for you, Mitch. I'm going to let you off the hook. This was a great presentation. I learned a lot. Thank you very, very much. Any closing thoughts? Mitch, I'll give you the floor here.
No, thank you all for having me. Thank you, everybody, so much. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
All right.